I've literally spent the last probably 2 days sat at the computer, so I just really need to get out for an hour or two. I've got a new rod and it stems in nicely with quite a few questions that I've had about. A lot of people struggle to cast that sort of 50 metres range here in England, certainly on natural venues, well, and commercial venues as well. 50 metres is kind of it's a range that most people, that would probably be the maximum that they, you know, are going to want to cast to. And the rod that I've just had delivered is one that's going to do that job. It's a 13 footer, which should hit that 50 metre range really nice and easily. I've got my measuring sticks, so I'll see you up at the res. In true style, just starts raining as we got here. Dad's come out for the ride. He's in there. This is the ticket machine. This is Damflash Reservoir, and it's a lot lower than what I thought, to be fair, but I think normally at this time of year it is lower than this. There's the ticket machine. Lots of people ask me about that sort of stuff. I'm not actually getting a day ticket today. Normally I do, even when I come up casting, just to help support the fishery, and that is because I will be getting a 2-month ticket, just like I normally do, and get that from the bailiff on the bank. But yeah, I mean, driving up to the reservoir, it looked like it was quite high, but when you look at it from this point of view, as you can see, it is quite low. There's the overflow that you may have seen in previous videos there. It's nowhere near coming into action now. But for some reason, this reservoir and Underbank Reservoir, which is the other one that's controlled by the same people, and you can fish on the same ticket, which is just over there, that has been kept high as well for some reason this year. I don't know why. Something to do with the water authority keeping the water in there for longer, but it's not too windy. I'm going to head up a little bit further around there, I think. Yeah, the wind's nowhere near as strong as what I thought. There's just something about a venue like this, you know. This is probably the deepest bit. I mean, where those gulls are there, it could be 15, 20 metres deep. And right up at the shallows there, you know, you could find areas where it might be 2 or 3 metres deep, you know, and it's just, I think it's that unknown. With these sorts of venues, you never really know where the fish are going to be, but hopefully this rain is going to pass over, so I'm going to pick a spot a little bit further up the res. This is what they refer to as the bay, the big bay. There's the reservoir. That's the ticket machine there. That is the road going back towards Sheffield. Ticket machine's there if you want a day ticket. We just drove around to here. We're right in this bend of the bay here now, but the water levels, when it's up at its peak, as you can probably tell, it comes right up to that tree line, and it can be very, very difficult getting in. But I think around that point there, where we can just see, I think we're going to be able to get in there and the wind's not going to affect us too much. As with most things, when you're looking at casting these slightly longer ranges, a lot of it's just down to them little percents, you know, the little percentage differences. And a lot of people think you can just go out there and buy a 12 or a 13-foot rod that's going to get you out there and think that's the end of it. But they might be doing that, and I know there are lots of people out there, because a lot of people speak to me about it, that, you know, they've perhaps got a reel on that's too small, the line might be too thick a diameter, the tip might not be right. So that's what I'm just going to go through with you, all those little aspects, and it'll just give me a great opportunity to just get a feel for this rod, just to see if it's going to fit into my armoury, and just to find out what kind of a job it's going to be good for. Interesting. Hoping that rain's going to hold off. Looks like it is brightening up a little bit. This is the point. That's going up there, that's towards the neck end. In front of us there, at about 40 metres, maybe 30 metres-ish. That's where the drop-off is, where the quarry is. Looks a bit surreal, doesn't it, with this footpath to nowhere. Very, very shallow there, but then it drops over the quarry, and that's looking back to the dam head. And then that's up towards the bay. Beautiful spot to fish. Really wish I brought my gear, to be fair, but as you can see, it's lovely and comfortable here. You can actually it gets steeper the further that way that you go, but this would be ideal, wouldn't it? So I've got some old ground bait, just what I've saved up. If you're ever going to go out and do this, you don't want to go and using some of your favourite expensive ground bait, do you? So always just save up some ground bait from a past session, and yeah, there isn't any wind at the moment, so that's going to be quite favourable. So I'm going to get the rod set up, get it clipped up at bang on 50 metres. I'll show you the full setup once I'm ready to go. I always tell myself, don't come up here filming on a Saturday. It's very, very popular. It's always been popular, but since COVID and since after lockdown and all that sort of thing, a lot of people found out about this place because it was so close to Sheffield, and they've not stopped coming up here. But it is a fantastic walk all the way around. I think it's 3 miles or 3.5 miles all the way around, I think, I'm not sure. So I'm going to get clipped up. I'll go through the setup, I'll go through everything with you, every single aspect, all right? But I'll just get this clipped up now. I'll keep this real time. These are 2 meters, these sticks, all right? So if there is anyone out there disputing the range or anything like that, then you can obviously count them back. You can have your sticks at whatever length you want. These are at 2 meters. You could have them at 3 meters, 4 meters. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 44, 46, 48, 50. All right, so I'm gonna clip up there. And I like to always count mine back, just because it's quite easy to lose count, or you're chatting to someone at the next peg or whatever. It's just a bit of something I've always done, just to make sure. It's amazing how many times you can miscount when you're talking. Now when you're doing this, you can do it on the back wind. I prefer to do it on the back wind, but if you're gonna do that, just try and make sure that you're not gonna let it run away from you, because it's quite easily to suddenly get in tangles with this. If your line suddenly comes off the sticks, you can end up in a right raffle. There's no prizes for doing it the quickest. Just make sure it's right. Some people undo the drag on the reel and just do it that way. And just, you know, it's whatever's comfortable for you, as long as the end result is the same. So that's bang on 50 meters now. So let me show you the setup. First of all, the reel. Now the eagle-eyed ones amongst you will probably notice that that isn't the ideal reel for casting at any sort of a range. It's only a 3,500 reel. Much too small for casting any, you know, 50 meters plus. You can do it, and that's why I'm doing it. It was the first one that I picked up, I'll be absolutely honest, when I came out of the house. So I've done it without, just to show you that it can easily be done with that size reel. If you want to make it easier for yourself, a 4,000 will be much better. But better still, a 5,000 style or 5,000 size reel will make it much, much easier. It'll have a bigger spool, wider spool, so your line, or in this case the braid, can come off nice and quickly. And it means the retrieve is quicker as well, because there's only one downside to doing what I'm doing today, and that is once you've cast the feeder out, you've got to reel it back. And if you're going to do that for an hour, it can be tiring, particularly if you're going further ranges, longer ranges as well. So a 5,000 reel will be ideal. 13-foot rod. All right, this one has got a gram rating on it of 100 gram. Lots of people talk about that. That just gives you an idea as regards the actual strength of the rod. It's just a guide really. But I think a 100 gram rating rod is ideal for this sort of fishing. And if you want to go further as well. So that's what this one's rated at. But not all rods have a gram rating. Now casting this sort of range, you can do it with an 11-foot rod. There are rods out there that possibly even 9, but even 10-foot rods, depending on the make and the model and the style of the rod and the strength of it. You could still cast this range with a 9 or 10-foot rod, depending on the rod that you're using. But we're talking about making it as easy as possible. So a longer rod will make that task easier. 50 meters for me, a 12-foot rod is ideal. It's just right, but like I say, it depends on the rod that you're using, the strength of it. And for me, you know, if I'm going to go past that, I'd much rather go that little bit overgunned, you know, by using a 13-foot rod. So if you want to make the job of fishing 50 meters easier, use a 13-foot rod. It's just going to make it so much easier. Tip choice is something that lots and lots of people talk about. And you can probably just see the action of that rod there. Basically, as a general rule, the further out you go, the stronger the tip. Simple as that. So for me, if I'm going to go 50 meters or past that, I wouldn't go less than an 1.5 ounce tip, you know, and on most occasions I'll probably use a 2 ounce tip. I mean, you might find that some 2 ounce tips seem a little bit softer than others, but that's just down to, you know, the rod that you're using. For me, I don't like to use less than an 1.5 ounces when I'm casting this range. On this particular scenario today, the tip that is in here is a 2.5 ounce tip. And that extra little bit of strength, you know, it's just helping get your feeder out there, you know, it's just that extra little bit of poke that's going to help you get the feeder out there. It's going to help reduce crack-offs because you're not getting as much of that action when you actually cast, when you follow through, you're not getting as much of that with a stiffer tip. And don't forget, the further out you go, when you are actually fishing and not casting, the further out you go, generally, the more tow you're going to get. You know, if you've got 50 meters of braid or line out there, then that is all going to be getting picked up by the tow. So if there's any wind blowing, the water's moving, you've got 50 metres there of line or braid out there that is going to cause your tip to bend. So the more line and more braid you've got out by going out further, the more requirement there is to have a stronger tip. It just makes sense, doesn't it? The sun's come out, I can't believe it. This is my window of opportunity. The actual setup, braid. If you want to cast to this sort of range or further, braid will always make it easier, purely because there isn't any stretch in it, but the main thing is it's such a low diameter. This particular one's 0.10 submerged braid, so the diameter is very, very low. So that's going to mean that it can come off your reel much easier, and it can go through the guides, the eyes on your rod much easier with less friction, and you are going to be picking up less tow when you're actually fishing out there. Shock leader, it's an up and down leader, so the knot is just on the spool when my feeder is in the position for casting. All right, now the other thing that's going to massively help you out with any sort of casting, never mind casting at range, is having the right feeder for the job. There are specific bullet feeders, horizon feeders, long distance feeders. You can see by the shape of that, you know, the design of it, it's designed for casting. Low friction, so aerodynamic, weight forward. That's another term that a lot of people use. It's got the weight at the bottom. That is going to make a massive difference to your casting. Don't try and cast out there with a side weighted feeder or one that's not aerodynamic. You're just making the job much more difficult. Right, the actual cast, I'll show you. Dead simple. Once you've got all this set up right, it's going to make it so much easier. Always wet your braid, always. It's amazing how many times people cast out there on a dry braid and they'll get into a knot, a tangle, and it'll cause crack-offs. All right, the drop. The feeder, the distance between the feeder and your tip, all right? As a general rule, that's that distance there between the tip and your feeder. That is what we refer to as the drop. The further out you go, the longer the drop. That's about as simple as I can put it. All right, so if you're casting shorter range, you might have the feeder much nearer to your tip. But if you're going further, just have a slightly longer drop, okay? Simple as that, really. We've got all the setup done. There isn't a wind blowing now, so this should make it easier. The weight of the feeder will make a difference. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But basically, a nice drop like that of about 1.5 meters, something like that. We've got a nice 13-foot rod. And when you cast that out, because it's a slightly longer drop, it's going to send the feeder higher. It's so much easier with a 13-foot rod. And all these little elements are right, you know. And to be honest, my first impressions with this rod is great. I really, really like it. It's not a high-end rod, this one, but because it's not one of the high-end rods, you generally find that these sorts of rods have got a little bit more, a lot of people use the term, they've got more glass in them, you know. They don't feel quite as fragile. It's not as thin as some of the top end rods, but a lot of people like that, and this is why rod choice and reel choice is very much a personal thing. Now the final thing I just want to share with you before that rain comes back is just think about the weight of your feeder. All right, basically the weight of your feeder will make a difference. Generally this is a 100-gram rod, so a 100-gram rod is, you know, a feeder anything up to 50-60 gram is going to load this rod properly. And what I've definitely seen, I saw it myself a few years ago, but I've definitely seen it with other anglers, is that sometimes they get a rod and a reel setup and they kind of max out, you know, and they seem to get to a range, whatever the range that might be, where it doesn't seem to matter how hard they actually try and cast or how much more effort they put into the cast to try and get further. They can't seem to go past that range. Well, one thing that will help you with that is just to simply step up the weight of the feeder. So for example, if I had a 30-gram feeder, I could get a 30-gram feeder out there to that range easily today with this setup easily. And on some days a lighter feeder is the way to go. However, if you were struggling, just step up the weight of the feeder, because that extra 10 grams, this one's 40 gram, that extra 10 grams it's just going to bend the rod more. As you go to cast like that, it's going to load the rod better. It's going to put more bend into the rod, you know, therefore it's loading it, and that you're going to get that spring effect. It's going to send the feeder a little bit higher, and it gives you more air time, and therefore gives you more range. It's just about trying to make it as easy as you possibly can for yourself. There's enough things in fishing that are difficult. The only downside with 13-foot rods, in my opinion, is that you generally find that they're all, as far as I know, 3-piece rods, you know, and we are in a world now where we're used to having our rods set up on, you know, we set them up at home, we put them in a ready rod bag. 2-piece rods are dead easy to break down. With a 13-foot rod like this, it is 3-piece, so it can be a little bit A little bit tedious packing it away sometimes at first, but once you get used to it, you will get used to it. And you know, let's be honest, you know, if a 13-foot rod was a two-piece rod, I very much doubt that those two pieces would fit in most people's rod holdalls, would they? Because you've got to think about the length and the transportation and all that side of it. But it's gone flat calm now. Looks beautiful here, doesn't it? I'm due to have a session here over the next few days. So I'm going to bring the tattle up and just do some medium range fishing. It's really deep here. That slope that you see there, it just continues going and going and going. I don't know what kind of depth you've got there now. It must be at least 15 meters perhaps, might even be more, I don't know. So I wouldn't fish here too far out, you know, because I wouldn't want to go into that mega deep water. So a nice, you know, 25, 30 meter cast might be nice here. But let's face it, if it was like this, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. But what a venue, you know. This is where I spend a lot of my childhood fishing here. We used to run, junior matches used to be over there during the school holidays. And yeah, I absolutely love these reservoirs.